There it is, 7 o'clock straight up. Let's go. Welcome everybody to Wednesday Night at the Lab. I'm Tom Zinnan. I work here at the UW-Madison Biotechnology Center. I also work for the Division of Extension Wisconsin 4-H. And on behalf of those folks and our other co-organizers, PBS Wisconsin, the Wisconsin Alumni Association, and the UW-Madison Science Alliance, thanks again for coming to Wednesday Night at the Lab. We do this every Wednesday night, 50 times a year. Tonight, I'm delighted to have two speakers. We're going to introduce one and then the other. The two of them are Laura Wyatt and Adam Gudlock. They're both with the Lakeshore Nature Preserve here on the campus of UW-Madison, and the division they work for is Facilities and Planning Management. I'm going to start with Adam because he's going to bat second. Adam, 5 questions. Where were you born?
I was born in Mauston, Wisconsin.
And where'd you go to high school?
Wyatt on the east side of Madison.
And where'd you go for your undergrad and what did you study?
I was a UW undergrad, studied wildlife ecology, BS in natural resources.
And did you go for any advanced degrees?
School of Life.
Way to go. SOL. Which is better than, never mind. Okay. When did you start working for the university and specifically the Lakeshore?
I started with the Lakeshore in 2009. Been here 13 years.
Very good. And you're going to speak second, and now I'm going to have Laura Wyatt come up and suffer through the same grillage.
Oh, yes.
How's it going?
Very good.
This is what we call grillage in the village.
Yes. And you said I could make up answers if I wanted to.
I heartily encourage it. Yes.
Okay.
And what planet were you? Where were you born?
I was born in Hamilton, Ohio, a burb just north of Cincinnati.
Oh,
So I'm a Buckeye.
way to go. And where'd you go to high school?
Well, I spent most of my growing up years in the suburbs of Chicago, in Naperville, in Downers Grove. So Naperville, but my father was in nuclear research, and so we moved around a bit. And I spent a year and a half in Mount Vernon, Indiana on the Ohio River.
Wow. And then where'd you go for your undergrad and what did you study?
Well, I come from a family of Boilermakers and engineers. So I do my undergraduates from Purdue, specialty in woody plants,
Good.
trees.
Great. And then
And my graduate degree is from University of Wisconsin-Madison in horticulture under Dr. Hasselkus,
way to go.
also in woody plants.
Thank you very much. Which of those things did you make up?
Actually, they're all true.
The sodium pentobarbital is working.
Yeah.
This is a great subject, I think. One of the reasons is that I was recently invited to be on the Friends of the Lakeshore Nature Preserve board, and we had Will like 2 weeks ago, and great to have you guys tonight. It is a splendid thing to be on the campus with a third of the land being in natural areas, and a lot of other places would be envious to have not only our location by the lake, but all the wonderful lakeshore things that go with it. So I'm delighted that tonight we get to hear from Laura and Adam on the Lakeshore Nature Preserve, UW-Madison's largest outdoor classroom on campus. Would you please join me in welcoming Adam Gudlock and Laura Wyatt to Wednesday Night at the Lab.
Thank you. Adam and I are very pleased to have the opportunity to join you this evening and to share with you a little glimpse of the past history of the preserve, currently what's happening there now that has a direct connection to the mission of education and research at the University of Wisconsin, and then also a little peek into the future. Our team, we have a very small team, and we feel extremely privileged and honored to be in the positions that we have. We are curators of a specific piece of property that has been appreciated and utilized by humans for over 12,000 years. And so we are here just for a very insignificant point of time. And excuse me?
Can you click that to get rid of that?
Okay, here?
Adam might have to help you.
Oh.
This is-
I guess we need to click that.
Yeah. you do it.
Yep, sorry.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. But, well, I'm going to continue talking because we've got a lot that we wanted to cover. But with that, and let's see, I'm trying to advance the slides too.
You can just hit down arrow.
I tried that.
Shoot.
Yeah, okay. Hopefully. I did want to share tonight the UW-Madison land acknowledgement. The University of Wisconsin-Madison occupies ancestral Ho-Chunk land, a place their nation has called Jope since time immemorial. In an 1832 treaty, the Ho-Chunk were forced to cede this territory. Decades of ethnic cleansing followed when both the federal and state government repeatedly but unsuccessfully sought to forcibly remove the Ho-Chunk from Wisconsin. This history of colonialization informs our shared future of collaboration and innovation. Today, UW-Madison respects the inherent sovereignty of the Ho-Chunk Nation, along with the 11 other First Nations of Wisconsin. And we are very proud and pleased that we are able to work with them as partners in curating this very important land for their ancestries of the past and future. Now, with the preserve, as Tom mentioned, it's 300 acres. It's a third of the campus, a third of that campus. Of the 938 acres, there's about 300 acres of built environment, and then there's about 300 acres of grounds and trees. But this is an exceptional amount of natural area. It extends from limnology to the east, Muir Woods, all the way along the lakeshore, 4.3 miles of Mendota Lakeshore. The UW is the largest occupier of Lake Mendota shoreline. It extends all the way out to Shorewood, where we're looking at Wally Bauman Woods at the far west, and also Eagle Heights Woods. Now, I have just a few photos in here, just some of the historic pictures. Does anybody recognize that building? You know, the Cow's Dean's house? Yeah, look at, boy, have things changed. If you look at the right hand, that would be your right hand side, in the center of the picture, that is what we now call the Picnic Point Peninsula. If you would look at the land just on top or above the rooftop of the Dean's home, that is Eagle Heights Woods. And going back to the original land survey of 1834, the description, land hilly and second-rate timber, white, black, and bur oak, undergrowth oak, hazel, and grass. Additional photos, as we look across the bay, you can see the, in the first, let's see, there's, this is the home of Edward Young. This is about 1920. You can see where are all the trees. A lot of very bare open land at this time. And then looking at the aerial, this was before, I think, the first official aerial of the site was taken. In the official aerial occurred for the government like in 1930s, but this was 1927. Again, look at where the vegetation, the trees are. Now, this does also indicate not only do we have grasslands and prairies, but a lot of this was farmed too. And then look at the cattle grazing on the Picnic Point Peninsula. This is a photo placed around the Narrows. Now, I'm not going to go through this slide. I think if you're really interested in detail, you can go back to the presentation. But I did want to highlight some important dates. During the 60s through about the 2000, the area was generally called the campus natural areas, also referred to as the wooded areas. And generally at that time, the management of the facility was cared for by both the Arboretum and the UW physical plant. Well, in the year 2000, the Arboretum embarked upon a restoration, which did involve the removal or proposed removal of some trees. There was a kerfuffle that occurred. And at that time, Chancellor Wiley decided that he was going to move the management to UW physical plant, away from the Arboretum. At that time, he also established a shared governance committee. And that committee would be provided the responsibility of setting management and policy for this campus natural area, this 300 acres. Soon after that, 2001, the Friends of the Lakeshore Nature Preserve was formed. And this was a group, the nonprofit group, that's always so important in these public-private relationships and partnerships to help see and guide the development of the Lakeshore, what would soon become the Lakeshore Nature Preserve. Under the guidance of Bill Cronin, the campus natural areas formally changed its name to the Lakeshore Nature Preserve. There was a mission developed, the first master plan in 2006. Additional staff was hired in 2009. There were now 3 full-time people working on the 300 acres. And then in 2010, the last major change was when the property was moved from physical plant to campus planning and landscape architecture, and the first director was named. Now, I put this in here. This is really tiny. I don't expect you to be able to read it, except that what's important is even today, people are not sure, is this part of the university? A lot of people in the community think we're part of the Madison Park District. I don't know where that comes from, Shorewood, I don't know, but we are part of the university. We do report through the Vice Chancellor for Finance and Administration. Our department, what I guess would be considered facilities planning and management. And our subgroup is campus planning and landscape architecture. This shows what probably the most recent organizational chart. Now, Gary Brown, after 30 plus years of service to the University of Illinois, many of those as campus planner, the individual that was very instrumental with trying to corral everybody and what was going where and how to come up with a livable community. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I say University of Illinois? University of Wisconsin. I am sorry. Boy, that's, I guess it's going back to my roots in Illinois there. But no, probably not. Probably no. He is a 110% Badger. But Gary has chosen to retire. He is on leave until his retirement date in the early part of 2023 in February. At this time, our staff of myself, Adam, and Bryn are being supervised by Missy Neergaard. Missy is the Director for Sustainability. And for a lot of us, we kind of think that the Lakeshore Nature Preserve is probably the biggest sustainability project on this campus. We're out there sequestering carbon and working with stormwater and a wide variety of environmental attributes. An important person, several other important people we wanted to include, Rhonda James, a senior landscape architect, She does work with us on any kind of construction we have within the preserve, and then reporting up through campus planning. And we are blessed receiving numerous gifts from individuals which support the hiring of students. In this summer, we had 4 students that were able to work on the land and are receiving important applied experiences. As I mentioned earlier, we do have a shared governance committee. There's 3 faculty, 3 academic staff, 3 students that participate in providing policy information and input to us. And right now, Rob Beatty is the chair of that committee. But our mission for the Lakeshore Nature Preserve is we shelter natural environments and cultural resources through active learning, research, and outreach in a place of respite and well-being. And that respite and well-being is something that we really appreciated, and a lot of people throughout the community and the campus during the recent pandemic. We shelter plants and animals in a variety of ecosystems and habitat types. We have woodlands, we have savanna, that's the Willow Creek, wetlands, that looks like our 2 mated pair of cranes. The Eagle Heights Community Gardens is within the preserve footprint, and also prairie. We are also responsible for safeguarding cultural and historic resources. We are very proud of the 3 mound groups that we manage and maintain according to Wisconsin Historical Society recommendations, and also the Ho-Chunk Nation. And just again, some of the historical perspective, that iconic stone or boulder fence around the entrance, something that was constructed by Edward Young around the early 1920s, from stones that were collected from southern Wisconsin. His home that you see in the upper right-hand corner, lower right-hand corner, the Madison Park and Pleasure Drive that was initiated in the late 1800s. And as you walk many of our trails, you'll be able to see the clinkers, some of the remnants of the coal furnaces that were used along the trail. And then one of my favorite in the lower left, Tent Colony Woods. And what has been a real joy for me is I've had the opportunity to visit with several individuals who started their families here by living at Tent Colony Woods during the summer with their young children, and to hear their stories and just to learn about the impact that the preserve had on them and their families. And it's just really rewarding. But the preserve is the largest laboratory on campus. And typically in a non-pandemic year, we'll have about 75 different research permits each year. And we do have a permit because we like to track what is taking place within the preserve. And also we like to monitor or ensure the activity that's going to take place is consistent with what the activities that we would like to occur. And specifically, we're very concerned about our cultural resources and not having people disturb any of the cultural mounds or burial areas. We have a wide variety of departments, not just biology or botany, but also English and arts. For teaching or permit users include the Biocore Prairie. This was established in 1997, covers about 12 acres, and is actually the classroom for an honors biology program. Ecology 460. They probably have more students out on the land each year, about 200. And this is a cross-listed class of biology, integrated biology, and also forestry and wildlife ecology. And one of the instructors said, having the students be able to go out to the preserve allows them to start thinking like an ecologist. And they're able to plan, and conduct their own research. Archaeologically, well, I'll just 352 with Mark Knoyer. And they were just out a few weeks ago firing up their ancient kilns where their students learn and practice ancient techniques in pottery making. And one that you can participate in yourself. This is the Biocore Bird Observatory, Saturdays from April through October. We have a group that comes out and bands birds. This was started by Dr. Mara McDonald. Unfortunately, she passed away a few years ago, but it has been picked up by Dr. Mark Barris and also Jacqueline Sandberg, who was a student of Dr. McDonald. And so you can come out every morning. You got to get up early though. They're out there probably from 5:30 to maybe 8. And I want to also acknowledge the Friends of the Lakeshore Nature Preserve for the many field trips, bird and nature outings, and events that they host. The preserve just has 3 staff. There's no way we could offer the variety of activities without the support of the Friends. We do not only provide a facility, but we do offer some grant seed money through the generosity of the late Dr. Henry Hart professor and Professor Robert Goldman. We have an endowed fund where we're able to provide $1,000 student engagement grants each year to undergraduates. But the preserve is also a place for environmental sensitive use. And you probably are aware that we do have 6 fire circles. Pre-pandemic, we have about 26,000 people come out annually to utilize the fire circles. Just recently, we had the question of, well, how many people are utilizing the preserve? And until 2021, we didn't know. We utilized some of our gift funds, did obtain a counter, and in 2021, we had nearly 140,000 people tracked going out to the tip of Picnic Point. Now, the preserve does not have any controlled entrance. So this only covers the folks that are coming in through the primary entrance going out to Ebling Circle at the tip of the peninsula. This does not cover people who are going into Muir Woods, Eagle Heights, Wally Bauman, or Frautschi Point. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Adam, and he's going to share a little bit about our land management.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, everyone, for being here and in Zoom land. So yeah, I'm here to talk to you about how we manage the lands of the preserve. And although preserve is in the name of the institution that is the Lakeshore Nature Preserve, it is not a jar you put on the shelf in the pantry and forget about. It's not a museum piece. It is an active, living, breathing entity. And and it does require a lot of active management in order to keep it functioning, both for the safety of our users, but also for maintaining a thriving natural communities and improving on what's there right now. So here's just a glimpse at some of the activities that you might see happening in the preserve throughout the year. A lot of mowing, especially to maintain trail corridors and gathering spaces, hazard tree work, volunteers out clearing invasive brush, and there's some of that brush then in the winter being burned in a brush pile, which we need to get a permit from the city of Madison in order to do. So managing the plant communities is one of the main thrusts of our work. And in my time here, the past 13 years, we've been able to expand and cover more and more ground doing that. And invasive plants, as many of you are aware, is one of those main focuses and main time consumers, I guess, in our work schedule. We have plenty of invasive plants, and we'll get to that. More and more, we're using returning fire regimes to portions of the land where we're trying to restore native plant communities that are fire adapted and fire dependent and really require that disturbance to thrive. We plant both seeding and oftentimes with volunteers planting plugs and or container grown plants. We mow, as I've mentioned, and we monitor both passively on a daily basis, looking for any issues that may have arisen over the night. We do have users that don't necessarily abide by the rules and etiquette of the place, but we also monitor plant communities to make sure we're achieving our goals and looking for those invasive species that might be popping up that are new to the area or becoming a problem. So we're constantly surveying the land. Speaking of invasive species, here's just a few of the main culprits that we deal with on a fairly regular basis. Garlic mustard in the spring, buckthorn, always pretty ever present, and always poking its nose back up even after you think you've removed it. Honeysuckle, Japanese hedge parsley, porcelainberry, which is a non-native grapevine introduced from Southeast Asia, horticultural trade, and a high priority for control across the state under the NR40 rule. So that's been one we've really been focused on in my time here, and have done a fair job in reducing its presence and prevalence across the landscape. It's bird dispersed, so it's still here and still spreads around if it gets to the seed production stage, but we've been doing a pretty good job of keeping it in check and not letting it spread. And then Canada thistle, I think everybody knows that one, but the list goes on. Pretty much from spring green up through the dormant season, there is some kind of invasive species we can be working to keep in check. Here you see lesser celandine, which is that early window. It's a very ephemeral spring plant that comes up, causes a lot of damage if it's allowed to get established to those early spring ephemeral populations, the native species. And fortunately, it hasn't really spread into the preserve proper, but it's within our neighboring Eagle Heights Apartments grounds. And we've been working with that housing group and they've been a great partner in helping us address that plant within housing property to help prevent it from spreading into the preserve. Jumping worms, if you're not familiar with them, we got plenty of good opportunities to enlighten you to the issue of jumping worms. And there's actually research. Brad Herrick with the UW Arboretum has some plots in the preserve where he's building on his research into jumping worms and their role and impact to the land. So as I mentioned, we also do a lot of work to maintain the facility for the safety and of the users. So we do a lot of hazard tree monitoring. Laura in particular has played a key role in that. And with our emerald ash borer situation and the decline of the ash population, we've had a lot of hazard trees and continue to have a lot of hazard trees presenting issues adjacent to trails in the preserve. So we're always looking to identify those before they become an issue and remove them, bring them down safely before they fall at an inopportune time. If they're off away from trails, they're being left to their own devices, their habitat. We have an abundance of snakes, shall we say, across the preserve right now. We also look to mitigate erosion. There's a picture there in the upper right of some Engineers for Sustainable World students who helped firm up a shoreline down near the Lakeshore dorms there using some Envirolock bags. But the UW Grounds Department, as we'll talk about here in a minute, also helps with a lot of repairing trails that are eroded by these heavy, strong storms, stormwater damage that our limestone paths tend to incur. And we have, just under 12 miles of trails to help or try to keep in good shape for people. We have the 6 fire circles on Picnic Point that get, as Laura mentioned, a lot of use and need pretty much daily maintenance just to make sure there isn't garbage everywhere. Summertime is a busy season for those. Their use tapers off in the colder months, obviously. And then we have memorial benches throughout the preserve that require attention on an annual basis, and maintaining both the physical bench and making sure they're safe and in good order, as well as maintaining any views that may have been associated with those benches. I guess with the view of the hazard tree, or the down tree being cut up this past June was a very busy time for us with the storms that came through. We had in the range of 35 trees on trails across the preserve, and many more near adjacent to trails that had come down. So working with the UW Grounds Department again, as well as preserve staff, we were able to get those cleared in a fairly short order. So how do we get all this work done? It takes a team effort across the board. We have the 3 full-time staff that Laura mentioned, and our seasonal staff we've been able to hire over the years. Currently, we have 4 student workers. Their hours are tapering off as the semester comes upon us, but they've been full-time over the summer. We also work with contractor crews. So some of that arborist work is done by contractors. We have a separate contract for vegetation management, which helps us in addressing invasive species issues. And the UW Grounds Department, as mentioned, is a big partner on a variety of fronts, in helping us maintain the infrastructure of the preserve. So here they are helping on Picnic Point with some tree removals. I think that picture was a few years back, red oak mortality from oak wilt. We share a intern crew called the Prairie Partners in the summer. This is a program run through the Madison Audubon Society, and 5 different sites in the area participate. The crew's out each site 1 day a week. So we get Thursdays in the summer, and the crew comes and works 12 days for us in the summer. And we give them a broad range of experience. But we also get a lot of good work out of them doing that invasive species work, helping maintain trails, and doing some of the surveying. And then the volunteers, as we will see, are an integral part as well. So our volunteer program, why is it staying up here? I just realized that. Oops. Okay. Always something, huh? It wasn't. Hey, there we go. Thank you. That's Dylan. Thanks, Dylan. So our volunteer program engages the campus as well as the larger Madison community. Bryn Scriver, who's not here with us tonight, is the volunteer and outreach coordinator. And really a main goal for that program is not just to get work done, but also to promote this land ethic and connect people to the land and have a better understanding and better connection with it. So it also helps us meet our annual work plan and land management needs, but really trying to build that community of awareness for what we have here, both in the preserve, but in the wider area. So volunteers can get involved in a variety of ways, from drop-in work parties that are typically on a Saturday or Sunday, to campus groups or different organizations. Oftentimes companies will come out for a work day arranged through Bryn. And students are a big pool of volunteers that we pull from, and some classes are actually service learning classes, and they are required to complete a set number of volunteer hours. So Preserve is a very convenient place to help fill that need. And then the volunteer stewards are individuals who come out and help us from anything from trail maintenance to invasive species control and planting and seed collecting. I see one in the audience tonight. So thank you to our volunteer stewards. So what do they do? As I was just mentioning, these volunteers help a lot with invasive plant control, from cutting buckthorn to pulling garlic mustard. Those are probably at the top of the list oftentimes, but there's a variety of opportunities across the season where volunteers can help. They help us reintroduce native plants through planting events, as well as seeding often in the dormant season. They help us collect native seed that can then be put back out into our project areas. They help us monitor and maintain the trails and the infrastructure. You see Vince here with cleaning our kiosk. We have several of those throughout the preserve. And then they also help us with our monitoring. So doing vegetation surveys, and in particular, Susie Wilwolf, who's an emerita faculty in the botany department, has helped us a lot with monitoring the project that's been ongoing in Eagle Heights Woods from before we started doing work through follow-up of post-activity monitoring. So here's just a little snapshot. Numbers have been down, but 2021, 282 individual volunteers, approximately 90% students were out in the preserve, representing 23 campus and community groups. And they volunteered 1,944 hours of service for an estimated value of $58,222. And again, those numbers had been higher pre-pandemic. And then I just want to take a minute. So we're trying to do cover the preserve as best we can and care for it, all nooks and crannies. Not everyone is going to get the same level of attention, and not everyone needs the same level of attention, but just want to take a moment to kind of hone in on an area we've been able to do a lot of higher level work, and it's really a little gem that people might not be aware of right tucked next to campus. It's I have Willow Creek Savanna here. You'll see Willow Creek Woods kind of interchange. I often refer to it as Willow Creek Savanna now because that's kind of the state of the land as it is now. But the overall site you'll see on our website is Willow Creek Woods is still the reference. So if you're not familiar, it's down here in the lower right. It's right along the Howard Teman Lakeshore Path, which bisects the site. And it's adjacent to Lakeshore dorms. So Teejop President's Hall is immediately east, and formerly the natatorium, and now the construction site for the Baki Recreation and Wellness Center is immediately south, bordering this site. More history. Here's a view taken somewhere in the vicinity where the Vet Med complex is now, looking north. So Willow Creek would run along the left side of this image. Here's some cattle grazing, probably in a sedge meadow, wet prairie, under an oak grove that no longer exists. But in the background, that arrow is pointing to Willow Creek Woods that is still present today. So if you stood and took this picture today, there'd be a lot of buildings in the way, and that's about all you'd see. And here it is in 2006, an aerial view with the former natatorium there. It's a relatively small site, but it's got a lot to offer. Very diverse. It has that continuum from upland into the wetland, connecting to University Bay. You have Willow Creek off to the west of it, and it has Native American burial mounds as well. So these are visible from the path, at least the gooses, you know, on the left side of the image, the goose mound is very visible along the lakeshore path there. But you see topography here. It's a very gentle, undulating site, but it has a lot of little nooks and crannies that you don't necessarily see when you're on the edges. So happy to take people on a tour into the interior sometime. These are very gradual contours. This is not mountainous terrain by any means, just for reference. And it's special because it's one of the few places we have open grown oak trees left in the preserve. As Laura alluded to, a lot of the preserve has grown up into dense forest, and any of those trees that had been out in the main body of the preserve that formerly had open grown architecture to them, meaning they had grown in without competition in open sunlight, have lost this open structure. So we're fortunate to have this site still as a representation of what southern Wisconsin vegetation probably looked like more years ago. So here's just a couple shots of what that site looked like before management started. The site had completely filled in with trees between the open oaks, and then underneath that dense mostly buckthorn, but dense brush thicket that you really couldn't see into, couldn't really walk into. There wasn't a lot going on there beyond shade. So a plan was drafted, and the UW Grounds Department again provided their services to start removing those trees and clearing the brush. And this was phased over several years between 2008 and 2010. So started just before I started working here, and then I got to kind of come in as the work was progressing. A lot of debris was taken out of that site. And then each time there was a section cleared, it was seeded. Here you see an intern sowing seed. You have some student volunteers coming out to help plant different events. And then that bottom picture, I will admit some of these trees, although the upper crown is still in an open state, you can see the stubs of where those lower limbs were cut off previously, just due to hazard concerns, I would guess, for vehicle traffic and humans. But there's that tree in the bottom picture with a nice outstretched arm pretty low down on the trunk. I believe that's the same tree from a minute ago, the panorama. So initially, you open up a site like this and you have a flush of weedy growth to fight back. So it doesn't look like a pristine restoration for a number of years, and we're still working on it. It's by no means pristine, but here you see in the upper right, there was a project assistant grad student who had a research project set up plots across the site, doing different treatments for specifically looking at nutrient management. So he would have some that were cut the vegetation and remove it to try to export those nutrients. Some were cut and leave, some seeded, some not. So that project happened, took place for a few years, and then as tends to happen, there's turnover and not the resources to continue those efforts. But we do have the volunteers again also heavily involved in helping manage. And opened up opportunities for things that hadn't been seen there in a while. So the great horned owls returned and nested successfully in 2010 and several years following that. They didn't like the construction the past year or so we haven't seen them. And here is 2012, just kind of that young restoration still getting established. You're seeing some good native vegetation starting to come through, but there's the pair of cranes working side by side with us. In their case, they're working on breakfast probably. Here again, just an example of where the site had been and the amount of respect that had been given to the Mounds group. So there's a set of storage sheds that had been erected. That upper left picture, you see the chain. Right on the left side, next to that shed is the burial mounds. So these are some tractee sheds that the rec sports department had used for years. There was a turnaround around this oak tree and then a driveway down to the Lakeshore path, gravel driveway bisecting the site. Upper right is after the sheds were removed. Just that gravel pad was kind of roughed up and we seeded into that. Some students also did some planting with us. And then a couple years later in the lower left, you see a similar image to the upper right of what that site looked like a few years after removal. Again, another example of befores and afters. The dense thicket, the sheds, and then 10 years later, more of what a savanna would look like with campus right in the background there, Teejop Hall. Forgot to mention on the aerial, but there was a little corner that had been maintained by the rec sports department for use as a putting green. So it was mowed, just kind of a turf grass corner to that site. When the preserve was formalized, that was always within the bounds of the preserve to protect it from development. And they no longer needed it, so they handed management back over to us. And so in around 2016, 2017, we started moving towards trying to establish prairie in that southeast quadrant of the site. So a lot of weed control initially, mowing, cutting, using herbicides to prep the site for a dormant seeding and the hoops. And then in the lower left there, you see 2020, some of that early prairie establishment coming on. I'd be remiss to mention fire. We're talking about savanna because savanna is a highly fire adapted and fire dependent system. So it's a tough site to conduct burns. You're surrounded by campus on a couple sides, but fortunately we do have Lake University Bay down to the north of us, which gives us our one opportunity. But we have a very narrow window of opportunity as far as wind direction to get burns accomplished here, but it will be critical to the health of this site to keep fires lit here. And here's what happens when you do. You see a variety of different plants that are able to establish and put down new roots. So lupin, New England aster with some monarchs, blue-eyed grass, milk vetch, yellow pimpernel, spiderwort, and hazelnuts, which are a very characteristic shrub of oak savannas. And then just to end here, in 2016, after a proposal was developed and submitted, this site was listed on the National Register of Historic Places, known as the Willow Drive Mounds and Habitation Complex. And that was pushed forward by former Cultural and Historic Resources Manager Daniel Einstein. And he gave a nod to the amount of work that got it to this point, both by volunteers and staff, but a whole group of people that helped get this site back to where it was able to be listed. And I think with that, I'll turn it back over to Laura.
Thank you, Adam. Let's see. I wanted to share some recent milestones with you. Not only are we very active on the land and with engaging with our students, but recently we've completed a strategic plan which sets a plan of work for us for the next 10 years, which covers communications, fund development, relationship, partnership development, also efficiency and process performance, and then also completion of a new master plan. And so our strategic plan was completed in June of 2020. We then started to move into the master plan update in the fall of 2021. We are in the process of that right now and have worked through a number of drafts, obtaining public input. We will be meeting with a variety of local land managers and professionals this coming week, refining the draft, sharing it with our Preserve Governance Committee. And then also this fall, we will be holding additional public meetings for people to review and provide their input. So if you are interested in this project, please go to our website and look. We have a special button or tab for the master plan, and we do invite and encourage you to get involved. One thing that is extremely exciting that's also relatively recent is that this August we have initiated or started advanced planning for an outreach center at the preserve. This is would be a small building, nothing at the size of the Arboretum, but a facility so we can have our equipment and supplies and staff close to the preserve. Also have enough space for, say, a class to come out, be out of the rain so that they can meet and gather, do some research. We can do some seed cleaning, seed storage. Right now, the preserve facilities are scattered over 5 different locations on campus. Our offices are at 21 North Park, and taking a low-speed vehicle from that point to the preserve is challenging, especially when a school's in session. So there's a lot of exciting things that are indeed happening within the preserve. The master plan update, just to provide you, just because this is something that we're really engaged in right now, creating a 10-year guide for managing the preserve's land. Although when you're looking at the preserve, most of our managers and planners, we're thinking not 10 years, we're thinking 50 years out, even further than that. But we're looking at cultural features and how those are managed and maintained, amenities. We have those lovely pit toilets, but I think many of us are looking at a possibility of a flush toilet with that outreach center would be an advantage. But looking at how best can the facility support the university's mission of research, education, and outreach. At this time, we're evaluating the different land management strategies and resources that are needed to maintain the land in a healthy system. And then also, we are considering visitors' experience and being able to provide that important place of respite and well-being that I think we all relied on, especially during the pandemic. And as I mentioned before, we're gathering input right now, and then we will be looking at additional drafts and looking at a final plan this fall. So please look and participate in those public meetings. I did want to mention a little bit about money. Everybody wants to talk about money. The preserve, 2021 was a year where we had our budget was a little larger. There was an $80,000 expense for the cost of the master plan. We had a memorial bench for $10,000. We also had a $50,000 expense for the initial planning for the outreach building. But very broadly and basically, our support comes from the university. We generally receive about $200,000 a year, and that covers basic coverage for our staff and 20% of the director, and office space and computer space. We do receive about $60,000 of in-kind services from the grounds department, which Adam referred to. And the rest of that, the funds that we utilize come through from gifts, our gift funds through the University Foundation. And the Willow Creek project, that was heavily supported by a very generous benefactor who felt that that was an area that was needed to be restored and provided gifts through the foundation to enable us to do that. And I also want to mention, the Prairie Partner Program, which Adam referred to earlier. That is a program that is supported and funded through the Friends of the Lakeshore Nature Preserve. So if you're a supporter of that organization, you are supporting the preserve with gifts. The Friends did support our master plan process, a $20,000 gift. And when we have there was a fundraiser, and I'm trying to think of Day of the Badger. The Friends are very, very generous in matching the gifts that we receive through that. So, but with our gifts provide our ability for ecological restoration, for seeds, the cost of invasive control, the tools, our little vehicles to get around. The university provides us with one, and when you have numerous students that are working for you, we actually have 2 or 3. Our volunteer program, all the equipment for our volunteers is covered through gifts to the preserve through the foundation. And our equipment and any kind of capital improvement is through gifts. So we do appreciate folks that are able to be generous. Gifts of all sizes are important. Gifts of people's time, very important. And I think, with the students that come out and work with us, I know that one time I was out working with a group of engineering students, and we spent some time talking about how they will be responsible for the environments of the future. And even though they're in engineering, they have a direct role and duty and to help be a part of the solutions. And I think with all the students that come out to the preserve, we are providing that experience of developing their own environmental ethic that they take with them so that they can make a difference. And if you look at our campus, when you leave, I am hoping that every student takes that with them. There's a lot of ways to connect to the preserve. Our website, we're on Facebook, we're on social media, Twitter, Instagram, email. Also the Friends of the Lakeshore Nature Preserve. They do have a website, which is very informational too. On our website, due to Daniel Einstein, the former historical curator, we have a lot of history on our website, which makes it very, very interesting. So I do, invite you to go and take a look at all of these sources. And I think that, with the preserve, every season, there's a reason for you to come out and visit the preserve. And I must admit, probably my favorite season is winter and walking along some of the lakeshore trails, looking into the canopies and looking at the branch structures of the trees, but then looking out over Lake Mendota. We are so blessed with this wonderful resource that has been appreciated and enjoyed for, they say over 12,000 years. So please come out and enjoy the preserve, and please join us in being part of the future of the Lakeshore Nature Preserve. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be with you this evening.
Since we have 2 speakers and they're going to say, Mike, if you could speak loudly your questions, and then if you could repeat the questions for the people on the screen.
Okay.
That would be great. Who would like to start?
Adam, are you gonna come on up?
Yeah.
Or come on down?
Whatever. This would be for Adam, I think probably, but on the burn, so an area that gets burned, does that area then have to get burned annually, or is there a schedule?
There's no set schedule, but your burn frequency will be dependent on your goals. So the more frequent you burn, the more open the site will remain. So prairie needs a burn every 1 to 3 years. Otherwise, it will start being overrun by woody growth. Woodlands, it's a longer time scale. It really depends on specific objectives for the site. So with fire, the answer is often it depends. And
I do want to mention that
Yeah.
Adam is part of, he's been in the leadership of the Prescribed Burn Council for,
Wisconsin Prescribed Fire Council.
and so we're very fortunate to have, his networking and his involvement, for the preserve to benefit from.
Yeah, we have a couple online. Okay, so the first question is, Adam, did you say that the preserve has an abundance of snakes? Will couldn't find any.
I feel this is a plant. I'm guessing this question has been
Oh, that's an animal.
a planted question. I have only seen, coincidentally, only seen snakes in my time here at the Willow Creek Savanna site. And I haven't seen one in a number of years. So we are depauperate in any kind of snake. And I've been flipping over Will's boards that he has out all over the place, and I haven't found one yet this summer. So I can corroborate Will's findings.
Now, we did see that ball python, that dead one that somebody released.
Yeah, we found a pet one time, but there had been I believe a fox snake. That was the most recent sighting out at the nestled in the stone steps at Picnic Point at the tip a couple years ago. That's the most recent snake sighting.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could discuss a little bit about the history and problems with regard to the so-called second point, and also what is the status of some of the buildings on Second Point? Thanks.
So the question for you
Yeah.
Zoom followers is about Second Point and any the history, I guess, controversy you referred to, and any buildings out there. So yes, the Frautschi Point, Second Point area has had a number of buildings over the years. It was privately owned, had some cottages. Those have all been removed, so there are no longer any buildings out there. And controversy, I assume you're referring to when the Arboretum started managing towards Savannah at the tip of what is now Frautschi Point in the
Well, I
lake.
was thinking more of the problems because I guess there was the stingy doctor.
Oh.
Jackson.
I can't, I'm not a historian, but yes, Reginald Jackson, I believe, was the former owner, and I don't know anything about him, so I can't speak to him.
Well, he didn't take too kindly
Yes.
to people visiting it. I guess.
That's what I, in visiting, being on the land with some folks that were familiar, he did tend to not want to have university students crossing his land. And so was very protective. Now, that's some of the area that is part of my favorite area. So that's pretty disappointing to hear. But also knowing that apparently he gave the land to the Medical School of Wisconsin
Northwestern.
or Northwestern, and so then there was some land switches in order for the university to, and then the Frautschis were very generous and came in and provided support to purchase it. But it is, and I don't know if our website would contain more detailed information on that. Daniel Einstein, the former historian, would definitely know the detail on that.
I was just wondering, you mentioned herbicide application and just explaining, and was wondering what your guys' framework for when you pesticides and herbicides is versus more organic, technical stuff like that.
So for you Zoom followers, the question is about herbicide use and what the criteria are for when and where we use it. So again, kind of like fire, it'll depend on the situation, but for things like invasive brush control, so when we're cutting buckthorn, we treat the stumps with an herbicide that generally will keep it from regrowing. It's not 100% effective, but it allows us to hopefully move on to other things rather than having to come back and keep cutting the same plant over and over. And if you don't treat, it forms a Medusa head of regrowth. So you walk away for 2 years and now you'll have 8 stems instead of 1 that are just as tall as the plant that you cut down. So in terms of other species, so that's kind of the woody species side of things, but there are very pernicious or persistent herbaceous plants. So Canada thistle is one we'll use herbicide on to try to keep it in check and push back on it. And it's very situational dependent. Obviously, we have 4 miles of lakeshore, we have wetlands, and all those things are considered in where we're applying and what chemicals we're choosing when we're trying to address invasive species. Yep.
The Willow Creek Preserve is beautiful. How often do you have to replenish to maintain the preserve?
By replenish, I'm gonna take this as plant community, and that site, we've been overseeding parts of it at least every winter for the past several years now. I'd say the past 5 years. So we're constantly doing overseeding, supplementing the plant community. Sometimes it takes, depending on the species, very conservative species, so ones that tend to be less common and harder to grow, you might not see them come from seed for 10 years. So you might have to be very patient. So, and we also have a lot of invasive species, as I touched on. So that combination of things, we're trying to continuously overseed sites that we're working on, just so we're having that constant opportunity for new things to be established that we want to see there. And unfortunately, our site has been highly disturbed. A lot of it was farmed, so we don't have that native seed bank necessarily in all the places we're opening up and starting to work on. So we need to be actively reintroducing species.
And the second question is, since you are planting seeds for trees, have you looked if any funding is available under the Inflation Reduction Act, since these store carbon and that's a part of the climate mitigation strategy?
That's a very, we can get into a very deep talk on carbon sequestration related to trees in particular. But to the point of the funding, no, we have not looked into that yet.
Oh, it was signed on Tuesday.
You're right. And, with that, I would suspect that the information thread for that will come through the DNR. Wisconsin DNR has one of the most progressive urban forestry programs in the nation. And so, we'll be getting information, through them. I wouldn't be surprised if their focus will be planting in urban areas that are in making neighborhoods and communities more livable. But we will certainly, we like to check everything. We like to turn over every rock and board looking for things. So good suggestion.
Are there any areas in the 300 acres or so of the preserve where you're concerned about overuse?
Yeah.
Question was, are there any areas within the preserve that we're concerned of overuse? Certainly, I mean, Picnic Point is the hot spot, and the original master plan kind of gave a nod to that by highlighting it as an area of naturalistic management for heavy use. Undefined. So you fill in how that is to be managed naturalistically. I guess Muir Woods gets a lot of use because it's right tucked in with the campus. It's a little place where students can get off. So there's often trails popping up where we don't want them, illicit use there. So those are two that come to mind. Yeah.
Couple questions on Willow Creek. Earlier this year, I noticed there's a dam on Willow Creek, right, that is like half along the campus side. And I I haven't seen that before. Can you tell me more about that and what that's about?
Questions about Willow Creek and a dam. I believe you're talking about the Madison Stormwater Project, right? Is it right where it exits, like enters the creek?
Okay.
I mean, where it comes from underneath the bike path and exits into the,
Yeah.
so that's a stormwater, a sedimentation basin that was designed and installed by the city, maybe 4 years ago or so. So it was designed specifically to have a ramp for equipment to be able to go down and periodically dig out sediment. So the idea is sediment will get trapped there. There's a weir where the water spills over and the sediment is left behind, trying to reduce how much sediment is being dumped into the bay.
I was very interested in something with their.
Yep.
Could you speak to the overall tree health of the preserve, especially when you mentioned oak growth and what your long-term plans for the trees are?
Laura, I'll kick
Yes.
this over to you.
Well, the question was the long-term plan for the trees based on tree health. And, you know, as an arborist, this is a pretty low point. The ash that we have in the preserve are, I would say, probably 90% infested with emerald ash borer. And as Adam mentioned, we are removing the ones that, as they collapse and fall apart, could be endangering our visitors or places where people congregate, like our fire circles. I was very pleased to learn that the university, at first we were using our gift funds to remove some hazardous trees. But an appeal to the university, they did come in and they are providing us with assistance so that the hazard trees can be dealt with. But we do have oak wilt. You know, we are, trying to manage that the best we can. We aren't doing any trenching, but, with the oak wilt and probably what is even more alarming is the severe storms that we have during the winter, or not during the winter, during the summer, when we have high winds and heavy rains and the very hard rains. Trees that are in leaf, when you have water, adding additional weight on those leaves, that causes them often more weight in the top. They're more susceptible to coming down. And we do have a number of trees in the maple category. There's a series that were planted along Tink Colony that because of age, they're just collapsing and deteriorating. And it is often that we will find one tree will come down, and unfortunately it takes down not only that tree, but several others with it. And then as that tree comes down during the summer, if our oaks are injured, those injuries are ideal spots for bark beetles to feed, the bark beetles that carry oak wilt. So it's, we do spend a lot of time looking at the trees. And I think even with our master plan, once we have a master plan for the overall plan for the facility, we will be dividing management plans for individual units. At that point, we will be taking very serious look at the health and longevity of many of the trees, because I would say a lot of our trees are in very poor condition, just because of dieback and shading that has occurred and injuries and damage from other trees coming down. We also, I would say this year, we had an infestation of spongy moth, and this is what was referred to as gypsy moth in the past. It has been renamed, but if you were in the preserve this summer, you would notice that the infestation was very heavy. You combine that with drought and then spongy moth defoliation, and then heavy storms. And, once we get a number of storms during the summer, the soil gets wet, and those trees that are holding a lot of weight in the canopies, that soil doesn't hold them, and they come down even more often and faster. So it's I would say we are concerned. And so we are looking and trying to prioritize trees. Yeah, well, a consideration is that we are looking at, I think with the potential of a center, can we use any of that wood for building for the center? And working with the Office of Sustainability, they have the resources to help us, with those types of questions.
Do you use some of that down tree wood as the firewood for the fire circles?
The question was, do we use the downed wood for the fire circles? Yes. The wood that is burned at our fire circles comes from campus. We don't bring any wood in because we want to try to avoid bringing in insects and diseases.
Wasn't there historically a water quality problem with respect to Willow Creek, and has that been remediated now?
The question is about historical water quality of Willow Creek and if that has been abated. I really can't speak to the historical water quality of Willow Creek. It is a highly urbanized, channelized stream now, where once you saw the picture of what the site used to look like with native vegetation and a meandering stream. It now serves to drain a good part of the west side of Madison as an urban runoff, and it certainly is not a place I would want to be sourcing my water from. So I can't say it's of the highest quality, but I also don't have the data to speak to that. So can't unfortunately talk.
Right, I think part of the problem is due to some of its drainage basin included the stock pavilion when there were actually livestock there.
I don't think that's an issue anymore. But good questions to consider.
You mentioned great horned owls were there for a while and then they went away. I think that's an example of a broader question is what can we do for both new building and old to help enhance the Lakeshore Nature Preserve and how favorable it is to wildlife, wild plants, wild things. That's an example of environmental impact. Concerns about putting up another building. Is this the time to start thinking about how to design, build, and
So Tom has a question about started with great horned owls and how they used to nest at Willow Creek, and with the construction we haven't seen them as of late. And then the larger question of does that need to be considered more in how we're designing and building on campus, to sum it up shortly, I guess. And I think yes to all of those. I know there was a big initiative to document bird mortality with all the shiny windows on campus as of late, and then a way trying to look for ways to mitigate those impacts by putting stickers on windows, basically creating a pattern that birds can recognize rather than just seeing it as being something they can fly through. I think this would be great for some of our colleagues in campus planning and landscape architecture and some of the project managers on campus. I know it's things they're probably aware of tangentially. Is it at the forefront of their planning right now? I can't say.
I know there's attention now, especially like safety lighting below the observatory several years ago. And this whole thing of how you balance any particular lighting where you have a natural area
coincidentally, there is, Tom's asked to follow up about lighting in close proximity to natural areas, and there currently is a ad hoc committee looking at the east section of the Temin Path. And this kind of perennial issue of people having perceived safety concerns there. The data really isn't there to show that it's a dangerous place at night. And really, if you're in the preserve past 10, it's supposed to be closed, but this is a commuter path. So people continue to use that in the evening. And so there has been a commitment made to look, I can't think of the word now off the top of my head, a feasibility study for any improvements that could be made there to lighting and or the paved surface, the surface of that trail. And that would incorporate all of those considerations while they're looking into the feasibility of it. So lighting impacts to invertebrates especially are one of the main issues, as well as the aquatic environment when you're speaking of the shoreline there. So yeah, those things, hopefully in that section at least, will be in consideration.
There.